Hello, I'm King Link, and today we're going to talk about how Planet Zoo works. Planet Zoo is another game from Frontier Developments, the same company that previously released Planet Coaster and Jurassic World Evolution. In Planet Zoo, you own and operate zoos and try to achieve certain goals. There's a variety of modes, including a storyline following a couple characters, a franchise mode that allows you to go online with your zoo, and more. Of course, I'm publishing this video on April Fool's Day. I'm going to be upfront about this though. I'm not a big fan of this day, mostly because there's a huge difference between a great prank and what's normally done on April 1st. This is a special video for this day, but it's not intended as a prank. In this series, I tend to compare and contrast two or more games as best I can. Let's try something a little different. I chose Planet Zoo because I am a zoo aficionado, so it seems only right to compare it to my local zoo. But I have some bad news for Planet Zoo. My local zoo is the world-famous San Diego Zoo and Safari Park, and it's going to be a bit rough. I've personally been a member of the zoo since 2013, and I'm very proud of supporting them. Now, if you don't know, San Diego Zoo is incredible. It's often one of the top-rated zoos in the world, and they have a massive amount of conservation programs and efforts across the globe, and an amazing collection. So yes, for April Fool's Day, we'll give an honest and fair comparison of Planet Zoo against a real zoo. That sounds ludicrous, it really is, but we're going to have fun with it and maybe we'll learn something too. I'll be taking a little step back from game design and looking more at how they've adapted the idea of running a zoo into the game. Now, just a note, the footage of the San Diego Zoo is probably going to be a little rough. I shot all of it personally, and I'm going to be honest, I never really practiced being a filmographer, which is going to be obvious when you see the footage. I had planned on going to the zoo multiple times over March and improving the shots I got. Sadly, San Diego Zoo was shut down on March 16th, which I had to rush and try to get all the footage on that weekend that I would have needed for this video. So yes, the footage is a little bit rough, but we do what we can with what we have. Damn you, coronavirus. I also might show unrelated animals at some point, such as maybe showing a croc instead of a hippo. I do know what animal we're talking about, but I have enough interesting footage that I'm going to share as much of it as I can to keep this interesting. So let's get started. In Planet Zoo, you're able to build a zoo as you wish, and you can choose from 80 species of animals to purchase, exhibit, and potentially breed. You're able to do this off an animal market that is available in the game and lets you purchase animals as you look at their genetics. I do want to talk about how factual many of the features here are. The first thing I want to call out is that San Diego Zoo and Safari Park trumps that number of 80 species with over 650 species on display, not to mention the amazing botanical garden that it also has. But as for the animal market, well, that is something similar to real life. Zoos work with other zoos to maintain the species using what's known as species survival plans, as well as other plans with similar goals. And these have a list of animals in what becomes known as a stud book, and that is the actual name of the books. These books create a genealogy list, and the organizations that run the species survival plans will at times shuffle and move animals between zoos to help the species. I was actually able to get my hands on a European stud book as well as one of the American species survival plans, with both of these being for river hippopotamuses. I will be putting them on the screen just quickly, but it seems that at least the American stud books are a little bit harder to get, sadly. I just wanted to show that there is some validity to this idea. Are the animals bought and sold with real money between zoos? I'm pretty sure that answer is absolutely not, at least not as a direct purchase. I'm sure some zoo at some point has bought an animal before, but the point is with species survival plans, the idea is to bring genetic diversity to the species through interconnected work with many zoos. You can consider it a listing service that zoos essentially have as a way to get new animals, but making it a market in Planet Zoo is probably fine for the game. And that's the beginning of the zoo's life cycle. But what about the other side when a zoo has entirely too many animals that causes a lot of problems in Planet Zoo? What's a player to do? Well, in Planet Zoo, you can just release animals back into the wild and earn conservation points for it. That's just fiction though, right? Actually, Planet Zoo has some basis in reality in this area too. There's about 40 programs that the San Diego Zoo participates in that have worked to remove animals from the endangered species list by releasing them back to the wild. That includes the Californian condor, which is one of their major success stories, and kudos to them for that. They also were participating in the giant panda survival program for over 2 decades, and giant pandas have been removed from the endangered list in 2016. Unfortunately, I don't have footage of these giant pandas because San Diego Zoo's pandas have been returned to China last year in 2019. But it does show that some animals will be released into the public again. Now, are random animals just returned to the wild? No, not exactly. There's a lot that will go into even releasing a single animal, but we have to remember that Planet Zoo is a game not necessarily perfectly accurate to real life. So, Planet Zoo is doing well, but let's get to something on screen that Planet Zoo doesn't do well. Mating. The fact is, I'm just going to have to say this. I like watching animals have sex. It sounds crass, but honestly, it's a fantastic thing to watch, and what you're seeing on screen now is perhaps mating. I'm just going to say that that's not like any mating I've seen, and I've been blessed to see many animals going at it. Honestly, I was lucky to catch this on video. I'm pretty sure this is a form of sex for penguins. I then proceeded to see way too much about how penguins mate and while researching this, and yes, Planet Zoo was never going to have true sex. I'll be honest, I'm a little sad because it's both a natural and important part of reproduction. In Planet Zoo, the gestation period of many of these animals feel fast, mostly due to days lasting only seconds. However, looking deeper and really examining it, I believe that they are accurate. A lot of animals will drop quickly and in large numbers. Now, it does appear that the game is true to the litter sizes and gestation period of each animal individually. On the other hand, in real life, just because 10 babies are born, not all of them are going to reach maturity. That's just a sad fact of nature, and even in the best of times in the best zoos, it happens. There's a reason animals have evolved to have larger litters, and it's usually because some might not make it. That's not a part of Planet Zoo, though, so often your animals will be quickly born and players will run out of space. Again, I can appreciate making this game, but I would be lying if I didn't say I would have preferred something a little more PG-13. Full-on sex might be too much, of course, but we've seen woohoos in Sims and dance mating in Viva Pinata before. Both of those are excellent choices. So what about the animals in the game? Most animals in Planet Zoo are well animated and look decent, with decent being a key word. While watching one or two animals works well, watching multiple breaks the illusion for me, and the animals don't exactly move realistically. Part of the problem here is likely because I go to the zoo a lot. I can tell you how a giraffe is going to move, or an elephant, or how they act. For instance, the simians, which are the apes, the orangutans, and even the mandrills, are freaking intelligent. They have significant head and eye movement when they move around, eat, and think. They aren't idle, and when they do sit idly, you do see some significant thought patterns as they focus on a topic or an idea, just as they look around. This is an inherent problem with video games, though. It's hard to make humans look good and interesting as something to look at. The more people and animals you do have to render in one scene, the less time you spend on each character to get something new and unique. The simple math of game development is to take every object in the game, animate it, and keep that time limit under 16 milliseconds or 33 milliseconds for 60 FPS or 30 FPS. That's the very fast version of that idea and logic. Far too simplistic for actual game development, but it should make sense at the problem here. It's why Kinectimals on Xbox 360 still looks better than Planet Zoo. They actually can devote the entire game to rendering a single animal or a couple of them, where Planet Zoo needs to work with 10, 20, or even 100 animals in a single scene depending on how far you pull back, including other logic on animals not in the scene. So, what about the animals themselves? Do they interact with each other well? Well, in Planet Zoo, if the zoo is overcrowded, eventually some of these animals do get a little aggressive with each other, looking for dominance of the pack, and animals can get injured. Dominance struggles happen, and two animals may fight, and fans will get unhappy. So, is that real? Well, the answer is yes and no. Dominance structures in Planet Zoo are definitely played up, and in real life it doesn't happen that often in Zoo, but that's usually because they're heavily planned to avoid that. But that doesn't mean that there's not aggression in some animals, and some play fighting will happen. So let's stick with lions and look at a couple facts that Planet Zoo doesn't get right. Prides of lions are mostly female dominated. Most prides of lions have all the females be related in some fashion and don't accept outsiders that easily. At the San Diego Safari Park right now is Izu and his sister Tosha. Etosha used to be with Mumbari, who has recently passed, but now is with her brother once again. However, Etosha isn't exactly accepted by Izu's pride of Oshana and Mina because she's not actually related to them. Or maybe it's that she is related to Izu. Also, Izu has helped to produce, well, a lot of lion cubs over the years, so many so that the son, Ernest, and an unrelated lion, Miss Ellen, will not be having children because apparently, well, Izu's seed has spread so far that they don't want to add more genetic diversity from Ernest's line. That should be Ernest and Miss Ellen having a little spat there on the screen. So, did I just bring this up so I can go into the soap opera lifestyles of the San Diego Lions? Yes. Yes, I did. But also, prides of lions can have more than one adult male in it, and Planet Zoo tends to miss out on that, as well as missing out on the fact that all the females should be related in some fashion, and probably in charge. Alright, with that little diversion out of the way, let's turn our eyes back to Planet Zoo. We can nitpick many things about the graphics, especially when animals, models clip into each other, and the lifestyle of these animals. But what about the gameplay? A big piece of the gameplay in Planet Zoo is caring for the welfare of the animals. This can be done through working on the size of the habitats, socializing of animals with their kind, the food that they eat, and the toys that they use for enrichment. This is ludicrous though, right? Toys? Well, again, Planet Zoo isn't that far off. A big part of caring for the animals and keeping them active in habitats is enrichment toys. Just like giving your dog a couple treats in a ball that he has to shake out, animals get these too, as these monkeys are clearly showing. They have to take the food and shake it out. Now, this is a way to engage the animal and force them to figure out the toys to get treats. Just giving them food isn't enough, but making them work for the food will produce better results for the animals, and this may include anything from a toy that you might find at a pet store to slow feeders or even handcrafted items. Yet, there is one thing wrong with Planet Zoo's enrichment system. Enrichment isn't just given a toy, but challenging each animal with those toys. If I gave you a Rubik's Cube and made you solve it once a day for a treat, you'd eventually get pretty good at solving Rubik's Cubes to the point that it becomes a habit. But in wildlife, animals that become specialized at one thing is a rarity. Though there are, of course, cases, for instance, bears who can open food chests or raccoons that can open dumpsters. In both of these cases, it's actually a negative for both the animals and the humans. So while enrichment items are used, there's a lot of planned variety in their use to the point that they can change daily. Animals might be given boxes to shake food out of, and then the next day food is hidden in a hole. The keepers will often hide food in different places, in the trunk of trees for polar bears, for instance, putting a watermelon on a floating raft, or hanging meat on a high hook. This is all considered enrichment, and it's done at different times. And of course, most of those are just specifically for polar bears. In addition, scents are used to engage different parts of an animal and more. Some might get stuff to trigger different responses, specifically to keep them engaged in just different reactions. Now, Planet Zoo doesn't really get this right fully, though, because in Planet Zoo, as long as the items are refreshed frequently by the keepers, that's good enough. There's no required variety for the animals, and ultimately, it's just a feature as part of the habitat. In actual conservation programs, the idea is to get animals to have variety in the schedule. Still, many of the enrichment items in Planet Zoo are used at some time by different zoos, so that is true. But it's also a much bigger production than Planet Zoo makes it. Now, I feel like I have to say that Planet Zoo kind of misses the mark in this. Speaking of enrichment, let's talk about the big issue with Planet Zoo. What's one thing a keeper should never do, but you're seeing on the screen right now? The answer? Walking directly into a cage with a dangerous animal. And while some people will immediately think of lions or tigers, almost any animal can be dangerous. I actually discussed this with the keeper that's on screen right now when she said the rule was never to be in a cage with an animal with sharp teeth. She would never be in the cage with the fossa that I'm showing you. If you've never seen a fossa, it's there in the background. If you look closely, it's like a weasel or almost a cat. And she is over 20 times the size of the fossa, but she's not going to go in there. So don't pretend you're Joe Exotic. Now you can also see here that the zoo is doing some work on the elephants area, and if you look in the background you can see the elephants in a completely different paddock. There are simple rules to keep both the animals and the keepers safe. Now, yes, sometimes keepers will enter specific enclosures to feed the animals there. Sometimes keepers can hand feed animals, such as the Galapagos tortoises, but these are specific to the animal, and the animals may also show signs which will have the keepers immediately leaving the area, such as being in heat, or more likely, the male version of heat called rut. Though this is quite rare, and they try to avoid entering during that time period. Some certain animals in specific exhibits can also be fed by guests of the zoo, or people can get close encounters with. In this video, there's a giraffe being fed as part of a tour. It's a really cool experience, but still precautions are being made to limit the danger to both animals and people involved in this. In Planet Zoo, though, seeing a keeper just walk into an enclosure with an elephant, tiger, bear, or so on just makes me cringe. Heck, just having a single door to get into the enclosure is not enough. And speaking of, the veterinarians usually examine the animals through cages, and most animals will be trained to make this far easier for them. In very rare cases, though, the vet will anesthetize an animal for surgery, which does happen here, but this is a rare exception and definitely not done in the same way. Besides which, you can box animals and unbox animals with a quick button click, which pleases my wife for some reason. Oh, and being in a cage with a hippo? Hell no. They're one of the most fiercely territorial animals, as well as being extremely dangerous. But oh, the hippo, how I love thee. So my favorite animal is really any animal I'm looking at the moment at the San Diego Zoo and Safari Park, but if I had to choose one, it's going to be my friend the hippo here, and we're going to dive into a few more nitpicky things, unfortunately. First, hippos tend not to move a lot, and in fact will spend most of their day and eventually live in water like 16 hours or so. They're extremely sedentary. They also tend to require large amounts of land, and most zoos keep only a single breeding pair, not a large pack that Planet Zoo requires for social reasons. Oh, and then there's a baby. Well, that's one thing Planet Zoo has on San Diego Zoo: hippo babies. Okay, come on, guys. Of course not. The San Diego Zoo's current pair of hippos, Otis and Funami, have had 9 babies at the San Diego Zoo alone. And yes, I'm on a first-name basis with the hippos as well as many of the other animals. Funami has had 13 babies in total. She just had a new one. Its name is, and I'm going to try this, Amahle? I'm going to be honest, I'm not 100% sure if that's exactly how you pronounce it, even with the pronunciation guide on the screen, though I will say that Planet Zoo does tend to name these babies ethnically, depending on where the animal originates from, which I heartily approve of. Great job there, Planet Zoo. And while I know Fiona from the Cincinnati Zoo was the internet's darling for a long time, she had nothing on Tony, Funami's last baby, an absolute cutie as well. The fact is, I've seen 3 baby hippos at the San Diego Zoo, and they're all adorable, which brings me to the next point. Babies in Planet Zoo are not handled well. No sex, no birth. Okay, I kind of understand that. I just don't even know how you'd show a hippo getting onto an OBGYN's table in the first place. But even ignoring that, the baby and the mom don't spend that much time next to each other in Planet Zoo. Hippos and elephants especially are extremely close to their parents, at least from my personal observations. Mom is always there and right next to the baby, both to nurse and protect it, and if not the mom, at least some other of the pack. Even when a hippo mom eventually goes back into the water, she'll have to lift her baby out of the water with her nose every minute or so because hippos don't swim and the baby's going to always be right next to her, pretty much until maturity. There are a few flaws with this in Planet Zoo. Hippos don't go into the water that often, for instance. They move around quite a bit, and the babies don't seem to be heavily watched. This distance shown in the game is not common for many animals who keep their babies close or even on them. In the case of some simians as well as kangaroos, and in Planet Zoo, yeah, it's not great. There appears to be a tethering between the animals, but it's far further than it would be in the wild. Now, that is a lot of what I wanted to talk about with Planet Zoo, though, truthfully, I probably could do another hour or two on just Planet Zoo and the San Diego Zoo. There's a huge amount of gameplay systems that focus on more like micromanaging the zoo, food, toilets, staff rooms, food prep, and more. Really, though, I wanted to look at the realism of Planet Zoo versus a real zoo, and I'm going to be honest, Planet Zoo does do a pretty good job with an understanding that it is just a game. I also wanted to show off my zoo and the cute animals it has, which I think I have. Although Planet Zoo does make some mistakes here, and after examining it, I can honestly say much of this is where game design has to meet realism. Running a real zoo probably would suck as a game. It's hard work, and just having 1 or 2 in-depth exhibits would be enough for a full game with all the stuff that has to happen to those exhibits. It also probably wouldn't appeal to most people other than maybe me. When you develop a game, you have to make decisions on what to do. For instance, a single bullet can kill a person, but doing that in a game as a player character would mean every bullet that comes at you is risk of death. On the other hand, car physics have to be somewhat realistic to at least feel right, even in over-the-top games like Burnout Paradise. So you have to balance both realism and fun, and that is an important act. honestly, Planet Zoo does a far better job than I would have expected. Planet Zoo is actually a fun, entertaining, and well-designed game. There's also a lot of nitpicky issues that I could call out on Planet Zoo outside of realism. The biggest one for me is that the UI can be a little weak, especially having to place animals in habitats before you can judge the animal's welfare in that habitat, but these are minor issues, much like Planet Coaster's issues. If you want to run a zoo, Planet Zoo does that job very well. Even my daughter enjoys playing it in small bursts, and she doesn't play many games. Now let's ask one last question. Is this comparison fair? We're talking about a $60 game, and the answer is, actually I think it is fair. A day ticket to the San Diego Zoo is about $60, and I'd highly recommend considering purchasing an annual pass to any visitor, as it's going to pay for itself for anyone who goes to both the zoo and the safari park, or either location twice. It is also a great cause. But a visit to the San Diego Zoo for a single person is about the same price as Planet Zoo, and as great as Planet Zoo is, I probably used my zoo pass more in the last year. But with coronavirus quarantining us, I'm limited to just daily feeds from the San Diego Zoo and Safari Park, and I've been watching those. The good news, though, is if I need more animal goodness, I can always turn on Planet Zoo and design my own home for many of these animals. Now, I also want to point out one last thing while researching this. I actually found this placard, which illustrates I'm not the only person who has tied the San Diego Zoo with Planet Zoo. They've clearly sponsored the San Diego Zoo themselves. One of the daily feeds recently was actually sponsored by Planet Zoo as well, and it really brings us to one final point. Both Planet Zoo and the San Diego Zoo have goals, and while I'm sure Planet Zoo wants to just sell a lot of copies of the game and make lots of money, there's a lot of educational content in the game as well, and a huge focus on using the zoo as an educational tool, both as a game and as a component of the game. San Diego Zoo also heavily pushes these aspects with a ton of educational material around the zoo. I've personally learned quite a bit at the zoo, and almost always leave the zoo with either a new experience to cherish or a new piece of information. With that understanding, I hope if you're interested in Planet Zoo, you give it a shot, and consider visiting your local zoo, especially if they're heavily involved in conservation efforts, and learning more about conservation programs as a whole and what you can do. If you want to do more, there are many resources, many groups. I'm a supporter of both San Diego Zoo and the World Wildlife Fund, but also recommend people look for local programs or specific causes if they want to focus their donations a little more. And if you just want to play an entertaining game, Planet Zoo is a great choice even for that. The support also doesn't have to be monetary. I personally am considering becoming a volunteer at the San Diego Safari Park. I finally decided to make that choice as I filmed many of these videos, and while nothing has happened just yet, consider volunteering your time instead of your money if you prefer. Truthfully, I really just wanted to make a fun video for April Fool's Day. I hope I have. I also hope you've enjoyed the footage of the San Diego Zoo. I don't know, I just got a chance to bring my two loves together, gaming and the zoo, so I took it. If you want to stick around, consider subscribing and ringing that bell. I talk games and game development as much as I can, and I have the Humble Choice coming up this weekend, and then we'll be talking more game design. I'm going to pop up my last video on Outer Wilds and exploration, and an old review about Planet Coaster, also by Frontier Developments, which is also worth a look. And until then, I'm King Link, and thanks for watching.